Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 117 of Humanity versus Insanity, the Crane Report. And this is being broadcast to you from the Plymouth studios of UK Column on Thursday, the 6th of June, 2019. And the topic for tonight is the common law court. And we'll be looking at how the jurisdiction of the common law court applies to, or challenges even, the British legal system, the orthodoxy at least of the British legal system. But before I introduce my guest tonight, and he was actually one of the speakers at AV10, there he is, John Smith, and all of the presentations from AV10 are now available to watch on the Alternative View channel, which is on the live stream channel on the Alternative View website. Now, these are available on a pay-per-view basis, so for less than the price of a Costa, you can watch any of these presentations. If you want to just watch a single presentation, it's £2.50, and you can watch it 3 times over 7 days. Or if you want access to the full suite of AV10 live streams, then for $29.99 you have open access for 14 days. Now, I know some people are really keen to see the presentations, but the live streams obviously were a bit of a lesser quality than will be available on the DVDs. The DVDs are currently being reviewed by the respective speakers, and they will be distributed on the 1st of July of 2019. Now, these DVDs are available from various locations. These are pre-order, so the pre-order rate is I think about 15% less than the full rate, but you can get them from alternativeview.co.uk, ukcolumn.org, or shop21wire.com. And suffice to say that the response from AV10 to all the speakers was truly awesome. And as I shall mention a bit later, the tickets from AV11 next May have been flying out like proverbial hotcakes. Now, one of the big issues at AV10 was 5G. And of course, this is going to be very much a focus in the coming months. And I shall be sharing the platform with John Kitson again in Topsham, which is just outside Exeter, this coming Tuesday. This is an event at Matthews Hall, 4 Street, Topsham. Postcode is EX30HF, and the event will run for 2 hours from 7:30 to 9:30. Doors will open at 7 o'clock. So if you're in the Exeter area, then please do come along for this event, and there will be ample opportunity for question and answer session at the end. Now, 5G, is it safe? This is the big question, of course, and the Alternative View team have been working to get a mini tour together. This is the first time that AV's gone on the road for a couple of years now. So it's a 5-week tour starting on the 2nd week of September. And here are the confirmed dates. Contracts for the venues are in the process of being signed. So I expect to release the full itinerary within the next couple of weeks or so, certainly before the end of June. So the tour will kick off in Bristol, a very pertinent place to start considering the suicides at Bristol University, where of course there has been a 5G test centre for the past few years. And then moving down to the south coast through Plymouth, Bournemouth, Portsmouth and Brighton. Brighton on Friday the 13th, so ominous there. And of course, the Brighton event, shall I say, I think is going to get a lot of interest because we have a burgeoning group down in Sussex there. Bournemouth, of course, is very much in the focus because a number of videos have been put out by Ordnance Survey showing the work that they have been doing with Bournemouth, helping them identify the blocks to the 5G signal. And of course, a big part of that has been the trees, more of which later. So in the following week, just a shorter tour there, Tuesday the 17th in Canterbury, then in central London on Wednesday, the 18th of September, and then moving on to Reading on the 19th. Following week, moving north, Monday the 23rd to Leicester, Tuesday 24th to Nottingham, and then to Ipswich and Cambridge. And then moving into the back end of September, beginning of October, we move up to Hull, to Sheffield, to Leeds, to Manchester, and to Edinburgh. And then the following week to Glasgow, Belfast, Swansea, and wrapping the tour in Cardiff. Now, there will be at least 2 speakers at each of these events. And as I say, there will be ample opportunity for Q&A. And we will be looking at the local situation in each of these events. And in particular, we'll be looking at the constitution of the local council. And we'll be helping people to identify the roles and responsibilities of council officers and the councillors as determined by their respective constitutions, which are legal documents, and providing a vehicle by which people can approach their councillors and ask them to respond to the concerns about 5G and remind them of their responsibilities to health, safety and well-being as per their respective constitution. And of course, we will also be focusing on the symptom of the 5G rollout, and this is the mass culling of trees, of course not formally admitted, but nonetheless very coincidental that we see this mass culling whilst the University of Surrey and its 5G Centre of Excellence readily acknowledge that trees are a major problem for the 5G network. And, basically, if people still think Sheffield is the problem, then, thanks to the Sunday Times and a Freedom of Information request that they put out, they determined last year that actually Sheffield was nowhere near top of the league in terms of the tree felling. And top of the league, coincidentally, is Newcastle with 8,414 trees felled, Edinburgh with 4,435, and the figure for Sheffield, 3,529. Of course, it would be a lot more were it not for the direct action in Sheffield and the activists there who challenged the injunction, eventually forcing a cessation of the tree culling, at least for the time being. So if you're interested in learning a bit more about 5G and the concerns and the increasing number of scientists around the world who are calling for a moratorium on this technology, then get yourselves along to these events. And if you are in those areas and are interested in helping to distribute flyers for those events, then please contact me either via Messenger or via my the contact pages on the websites, and we will get a supply of flyers to you. Now, at the end of the tour, we'll be moving to AV 10.1, which is confirmed as Sunday, the 27th of October. It will be in Kensington, in London. It'll be very, very close to a tube station, most probably, I think, Kensington High Street. And tickets will be available as soon as contracts are signed with the venue. Again, that'll probably be in a couple of weeks. So places will, again, be limited. But that's Sunday, the 27th of October, 2019. And that will be a day that commences at 11 a.m. in the morning. So you don't have to get up at silly o'clock. And finishing around about 6 in the evening. And as I suggested earlier, AV11, which is scheduled to be held once again at Horwood House on the 1st of May through to Monday the 4th of May next year. And basically, this event is now sold out of all residential tickets. So those people looking to book now, if you're looking to be residential, then unfortunately you're on the waiting list. Alternatively, day tickets will be available very soon for those people who want to take advantage of booking accommodation in the area this far in advance and hopefully benefiting from an appropriate rate. So what a massive endorsement to the calibre of speakers at AV10 that the event should be literally sold out just 4 weeks. AV11 rather should be sold out just 4 weeks after AV10 concluded. And one of those speakers who made a very, very significant contribution, got a lot of attention, had a tremendous response to his workshops on the Monday afternoon, is John Smith, who is my guest tonight. And John, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to tonight's episode of Humanity vs. Insanity. And I just want to make the observation that you said at AV10 that was the first time that you had actually presented in that kind of environment to that scale of audience.
Yes, that's correct. I've spoken one or two small venues to a small crowd before, but it was eye-opening. It was very interesting, and it was something I was glad I got behind me.
Well, you know, you were outstanding. Your presentation was outstanding. I mean, absolutely outstanding. And I mean, I think you could tell from the interest of people approaching you. And of course, this is the unique element of the AV events, that the speakers are accessible to the people who attend, so they can buttonhole you and sit you down over a meal or over a beer or whatever, and ask, you know, more detailed or more personal questions.
Yeah, no, it was excellent. It was great to meet everyone. They seemed to enjoy it, and I said it wasn't just myself; it was all the rest of the speakers that were there as well. Covered some excellent information, which I certainly learned a lot from. It was very interesting to speak to some of the other presenters as well.
Okay. Well, I always learn a lot, and of course that's part of the criteria for selecting the speakers, because you know, I want to be educated and stimulated, and you know, I certainly that was absolutely the case. I mean, there wasn't a weak link in the whole event, and I know that you were extremely moved by the presentation of David Noakes, and of course, you know, Lynn Tyre came up onto the platform towards the end of David's presentation. Lynn, of course, was and is, you know, extremely emotional right now. Of course, she still feels that she is facing the prospect of extradition to France, despite facing no charges in the UK. And you've had conversations with David and Lynn, and you've picked up the gauntlet to fight or help Lynn resist this perverse extradition order that has been put in place by Judge Supperstone.
Yes, well, the story itself is moving, and it's something which affects every individual in the country, not here but worldwide. And I think what's actually happened is the way that the state have attacked them is disgusting. They're actually using a legal fiction to try to prosecute a living woman, and they're trying to extradite her abroad, but they're not actually disclosing, or the courts are not disclosing what they're actually doing. And people go into these courts, supposedly courts, they're just administrative hearings, they're places of business, and they certainly are not there for justice. But they're using the fiction fraudulently to try and attack someone and extradite her. It's disgusting.
So now, John, there's obviously a lot of people watching this who will know precisely what you're talking about when you talk about legal fiction versus the living person. Or sorry, I shouldn't say living person, living man. But obviously there may well be others who are not. So could you give us a little bit of an explanation on the difference between the fiction, the legal fiction, which unfortunately most people believe is the living man, but the courts know very well isn't? And so give us a bit of an explanation as to how this works.
Yeah, the state, as is for business purposes, decide to create a legal fiction at birth. So they inform your parents that they are required to record your birth with a birth certificate entry. In doing so, the state then create a legal fiction, but according to their rules, they're doing so fraudulently, because throughout your life, they will only ever deal with this fiction. They don't deal with a living man or woman. They only deal with the legal title, which is the fiction. So therefore, any contracts you have are for the legal fiction. For example, you have a name on your driving license, on your passport, on your bank card. These are all legal fictions. They're not actually addressing you as a living man or woman. They're using the fiction to contract with you. Now, the difficulty about this is when they actually created this fiction, knowing what they were going to do, they have actually failed to inform anyone. Now, according to their rules under contract law, because it affects more than one individual, it affects the baby, the child, the parents, and the government. So therefore, according to the state's rules, it is a contract. Now again, according to their contract rules, or contract law, as they put it, for a contract to be valid, there has to be full disclosure, which simply means all the parties involved must know what's going on. Well, certainly I've never been told what they're doing, and my parents were informed, but the government have withheld this information. So therefore, because there's no full disclosure, effectively the contract is void, which means that the use of the fiction by the state, the legal title for men and women, is fraudulent. Now, because it's fraudulent, and we've decided at the common law court, when you actually confirm your ID or your existence as a living man or woman, you can do so by submitting a declaration to the common law court confirming your existence as a man and woman, but therefore you're allowed to claim ownership of the legal fiction. Now, the only way you can do this is because it was created fraudulently. So the state have no right to this. You cannot cancel it because it exists. It's on your driving license, it's on your passport, on your bank card. But the point is, the rightful owner should be the individual that they were trying to attach it to. So therefore, having confirmed your stance under common law as a living man or woman, you then have the right to obtain the fiction. Now, having done that, and I recently confirmed as a fact in law, while attending a court, a statutory court, that I was the owner of my living fiction, my legal fiction, which is Mr. John Smith. The judge at the hearing and the prosecutor were given the chance and the opportunity to challenge this in court, but both refused to do so. So I confirmed as a fact in law, I was the lawful owner of this fiction, and it stood. They had no jurisdiction, no consent, no authority to deal with me. And accordingly, they dropped a criminal charge against me because they couldn't establish this. Now, they didn't challenge this, but they were given the opportunity to do so, which confirms they know exactly what the situation is. But this is information they don't give the public, and through this fraud, which is effectively it's criminal coercion, they're actually using this against individuals to target them through their own rules, and that's all they are. They're rules, they're not laws, but they actually target individual men and women unlawfully, and they're penalising them. In the case with Lynn, they're trying to extradite her, but they're using the legal fiction to do so. Yeah.
And of course, this legal fiction emanates from the Cestui Act of 1666, and the legal profession. I mean, it actually does stagger me that some of them don't know of this act. But when you say Cestui, they know exactly what you're talking about, because in their parlance, Cestui has been shortened to Cestui. And as soon as you say Cestui, they know precisely what you're talking about. But if you ask anyone who is a member of the Bar Association, they immediately go into denial.
Yeah, well, they would do, because they don't want the public to know what's going on. The Cestui Trust effectively says it was created, the Act was created because of the problems in 1666. Now, at the time, it's far, not that I was alive at the time, I said, but there was a great plague. There was also a great fire in London. Now, my understanding is during this time, there was many people had died, and at the same time, the Crown was short of income. So they had decided with the bankers they would try to sort out a system whereby they can use legal fictions to make money. But they decided that they would set up this act, and the requirement was that the parents or anyone alive had to record their birth and the fact they existed. So from then onwards, they started recording births. But in doing so, the state attached the fiction, which they then used fraudulently. I said, but over the years, they've actually informed this, and people believe that it's a legal requirement. Well, it is a legal requirement. It's not lawful. It's just to record their birth. It says, and the state will actually penalise people and threaten to penalise people for failing to register a birth. But it's not a lawful requirement. You don't have to.
Well,
All
and
the
of course,
systems,
the travellers community
yeah,
do not register their births, and this is one of the reasons why the establishment comes down so hard, or attempts to come down hard on the travellers, is because they have no jurisdiction over the travellers
no,
because their births are not registered.
yeah, they don't. They take. It says what they're doing is, we've mentioned already, it's criminal coercion. Now, when I was speaking at the AV10 conference, which people don't realise, hundreds of years ago, and I can't remember the exact year, but supposedly slavery was abolished. It hasn't. We still have slavery. But to be quite honest, it says the government are quite good at what they're doing, because they've actually stated slavery is abolished, but they've disguised it. So what they're doing is they're actually attaching a legal fiction to every living man and woman, and they're actually using that for fraudulent purposes. But effectively, it says they're not actually branding you with an iron as used to do in the old days, but they're actually stating to you in the willing court, they will ask you your name, they'll ask you to identify with a fiction, and if you refuse to do so, they will actually issue a warrant for your arrest for non-appearance. Now, you can actually stand and speak to a judge literally 10, 15 feet away, and they actually issue warrants for your non-appearance because you will not accept the legal fiction. They cannot deal with a living man, which has been proven in my case and various other cases. The state, because it's a corporation, it's a business and it's run for profit, they cannot deal with the living men, only fictions. If you
But
do not accept the fiction, they have no control or authority over you, which is what we're trying to do in Lynn's case.
Well, and of course, many people, again, watching this program tonight will know that I also challenged the jurisdiction of the civil courts in exactly the same way when one of the fracking companies tried to take me into bankruptcy, supposedly for court costs that had been awarded against me. And, to keep a long story short, but I resisted the challenge on the basis that I was the executor of the Sestwi Kivi Trust, the SEDI Trust, in the name of Ian Rowland Crane. And so as the executor, any attempt to administer that trust was unlawful. And I actually appointed the registrar as the trustee of that trust, and basically he went into apoplexy. And the way in which they ultimately dealt with it was very, very creative, because what they actually did was they created another legal fiction in the name of Ian Rowland Crane, but that legal fiction has nothing at all to do with me. It was created purely for the purpose of balancing the books. And obviously, this is not something that everybody can step up to, because it does require an enormous amount of study and work and practice, and actually learning to use what we think are English words in a completely different way.
Yeah. It's quite clever, having learned about this and watched people over the years and spoken to different people. I go back to a story that one of the first things I learned, when you actually look at the English language, and you have a dictionary. So you can take the Oxford Dictionary for English. So any word there you can look, it has a meaning, and the meanings do not change. They will add occasionally new words, and there may be a new addition, but the existing words you have remain there, and the meaning stays the same. Now, if you already have a dictionary, why do you require a legal dictionary? It's exactly the same words, but under law, the legal system, the words have a different meaning. So therefore, this is the different meaning they use is the concept of legalese. So the courts, the police, they use a completely different language which people are not aware of. Now, unless you know the tricks and you know the language they use, you're actually going to get sucked into their system, which is where they win, because once they have authority and jurisdiction, they will take, through fraudulent means, you're in their system, which means they can then penalise you and hold you accountable. So the trick is to try and get out the system and to make sure that they have no authority or jurisdiction over you, which is what we do with the common law court.
So just some examples of to explain what we're talking about here, and I'll speak from my own experience. So when the registrar asked me my name, my response was not to immediately just offer my appellation, but to tell him that I have an appellation, and my appellation is Ian, and he may refer to me as Ian or Sir. But, it is not to be taken as any granting of jurisdiction. And when he asks for a date of birth, I said, well, I couldn't possibly answer that because it would purely be hearsay. So at each stage, whatever, and of course the classic is, do you understand? And they will try and use that as the catch-all, because the moment that you respond in the positive, you have effectively given them jurisdiction, because what you have unwittingly acknowledged is that you stand under them. So, of course, the response again to the question is, do you understand, is I comprehend, but I do not stand under you. And so, this repartee that unfortunately has to go on before the case can proceed, and basically either the judge or the registrar in my case acknowledges that they do not have the jurisdiction, and so what they will tend to do is adjourn it so that basically they can kick the can down the road and pass the problem on to somebody else, or find a solution to effectively close it out so that there's no further embarrassment. And
yeah.
I mean, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of successful challenges to the legal system through using common law, but of course they're never reported. And even in my case, where there was a sympathetic journalist present through all the hearings, but it was so far, the exchanges between myself and the registrar were so alien to her, were so far beyond the bounds of her perception, that she actually couldn't comprehend what had taken place, and therefore decided that she couldn't actually write a report on what had transpired, because she didn't understand it, didn't comprehend it.
Yeah. It's exactly what the situation is. The existing court system is set up. It's not for justice. We have no justice here, which I learned the hard way when I first started off on this road. You have a system here which is literally a business. It's a business, it's a registered company, it's run for profit. Now, they decide what's in their interest, and they protect vested interests, big bodies, big companies, big money. It's nothing to do with justice for living men and women. The system they use is fraudulent, and the judges all know this. Now, the fact is, just now, they are allowing this system to run. They're using it criminally against the people. Now, to do so, these idiots, which I call them, are not being held accountable, because they're committing crimes on a daily basis in every court in this country. And not only here, but worldwide. They're doing this all over, attacking people, and they're not being held accountable. What we're actually doing with the common law court. Now, the common law court exists because it is the people. And the common law court is the people. It's not involved with the state. It's not connected to the state. It's not run by the state. It is the people.
So what are the origins of the common law court, John?
Yeah.
What are the origins of the common law court? Because my understanding is it goes back to at least the 13th century.
Oh, go back further than that. He says we go back. You see, you've got various documents have been established, and the statutory systems have set up, or the justice systems have been set up predominantly using certain documents which people know of. You have the Magna Carta in 1215. In Scotland, there was the Declaration of Arbroath in 1320, and then the Declaration of Arbroath was used with Magna Carta to set up the Declaration of Independence. Now, these documents are valid documents. They're used, but unfortunately, the state tried to dilute them or now ignore them. In this country, what they actually do is say that the Magna Carta has now been replaced because of statutory legislation, which is incorrect. It says the Magna Carta in 1215 stands to this day and can never be altered. But they're actually telling the public that it has been changed, and they will relate to statutory laws which has done so. Now, again, statutory legislation is not law. It's a rule. It's a rule for a corporation, a company. It's the same as saying if you get a court summons to attend a court, they're courts. They're not courts. They're places of business. They're administrative hearings. They're not courts. But if you get a summons to attend there, it's exactly the same as a big company, a supermarket company, whether it's Tesco's or Asda, sending out a court summons for a parking violation in their car park. If they send out a summons inviting you to attend their premises because they're going to prosecute you for a parking offence, would you go to Tesco's for a hearing? Well, no, you tell them to sod off. Well, it's exactly the same with the statutory courts. They're exactly the same. They have the same authority. It says they are just a corporation, a place of business. They're not law. It says now the people have the authority in this country. The people obviously have the authority. They make the laws, they decide. Now, based on the principles of causing no harm, no loss, no injury to anyone, and ensuring that you remain honourable in your contractual dealings. That is the basic principles. Now, we use the words such as common law because this seems to be in the English-speaking countries. Most people acknowledge common law in some shape or form, but the common law court is used, it's based on natural principles. It's effectively natural law. It's also universal law. It's also law of the land. It could be God's law. Now, it doesn't matter which category you put it under. It's basic principles of natural law, God's law, it's the same. Doesn't matter where you come from, race, religion, this is your beliefs, it doesn't make any difference. This is applicable to everyone. Natural law principles, universal law, you can use this. It's applicable to everyone. If they confirm their standing as a living man or woman, you can do so and use this. Now, up until now, many of your listeners will have a record of their existence, but within this record, the only way I can clarify they exist would be with a statutory document. So you would find out where someone lived, you would go to the polling records, the voters' roll, the council tax, you would go through the DVLA, driving licence, you've got passports, you've got bank cards, national insurance cards. All these things are statutory legislation. Up until the common law court set up a process, there is nowhere else in the world that actually has an international database available for living men and women. Now, we actually have this just now. As from today, we have 59 countries that have signed up to the common law court. Now, it's not people viewing, it's actually people from 59 countries have recorded their birth. So that's effectively confirmed that they exist as a living man or woman, which entitles them to use common law. Now, while common law and the common law court and the process is applicable to everyone, you can't actually use something if we don't even know you exist. So there's no charge for doing this, but by making a simple declaration of your existence, it then qualifies you to say, look, I am a living man, and I can confirm it. Now, we've done that in the statutory courts, and we've actually had the judges confirm when we've produced this information that they have no personal jurisdiction over a living man or woman. So therefore, you've got strike one, they've no authority. So then it comes to the second issue, which is that of the legal fiction, which it has been created fraudulently, and once you apply for ownership of it, you make an application, you're then granted ownership of the fiction, and when you confirm that in court, you've taken away the authority and jurisdiction that they believe that they have.
Exactly. It's as declaring yourself as the executor of the trust in the name that appears on the legal fiction. So now moving forward, obviously, Lynn and David have been victims of this fraud. And what's interesting is Judge Nicholas Lorraine Smith, I think, went as far as he dare in acknowledging the fraud when he said that this was not a court of law. He was not presiding, sorry, it was not a court of morality. He was not presiding over the moral issues. He was presiding over a court of law, which by definition meant that he was effectively acting on behalf of the corporatocracy. And, but despite making that observation, of course, he still went ahead and carried out the duties for which he's extremely handsomely well paid. And I believe is about to get another 70-odd thousand pounds on top for the role of protecting the state. Now, so David obviously served his sentence, or he's in the process of serving the sentence. He's out of jail, still tagged, still under curfew. Lynn, of course, faced no criminal charges whatsoever in the UK, but the French have sought to extradite her. And, I was witness to the fraud perpetrated by Judge Michael Supperstone, who, despite a total lack of evidence, and didn't even have the cojones to make a ruling in court, waited until some 6 weeks later and then simply wrote to her and said, yep, you're going to be extradited. And of course, that had happened literally, I think, 24 hours before Lynn and David came up to AV10 at the beginning of May. So now Lynn believes, as far as the criminal courts are concerned, that she is going to be extradited purely on the basis, and I'll make the supposition on the basis of one of Supperstone's comments, that the French judiciary, this is a case of reciprocity, where, the French are asking for someone to be extradited, and yeah, we can't see any good reason, but on the other hand, there are times when we want people extradited from France, and so, in the interest of reciprocity, then we will simply rubber stamp it and off she goes. Now, you convened a common law court to challenge this ruling, and in that process, you annulled the ruling made by Judge Supperstone. So, John, talk us through how the common law court was convened and the process for annulling the Supperstone ruling, and now what is happening in terms of the head-to-head between the common law courts and the British legal system.
The issue of the extradition order that was granted was at the request of the French. But what you have to remember just now is when the order has been issued, it's issued against a legal title, a fiction. Effectively, it's not issued against a living woman because they have no authority over a living woman. So they're using fraud to try to attach the fiction to a living woman. Now, they can't do that. That's fraudulent in itself. Now, while we occasionally hear stories of certain judges in the statutory courts, as they call them, they put out some comments occasionally saying that they're speaking about courts of morality and various things like that. That while that's good to hear these sort of things in court, as you said just now, it doesn't prevent them from proceeding anyway. And in doing so, they're committing fraud because they're using fraudulently the legal title without full disclosure. So what we actually did, or what I did, having met them at AV10, listened to the story as well, and then decided this is unacceptable, I'd actually spoken to them just now. Now, given the state that Lynn is in just now and the effect it's had on her, it's difficult for her to go in and deal with this matter in court. So I put it to her just now that obviously she shouldn't be dealing with this. And after speaking to her, I actually obtained the power of attorney for her, which would allow me to address this situation. So having obtained the power of attorney for her, I then decided to speak to her and say, right, what I'm going to do now is I need to obtain ownership of the legal title, which had not been claimed. So therefore, I obtained ownership of the legal title for Linda. Now, that being the case, I then decided, based on the decision from Justice Supperstone, that effectively was fraudulent. So I decided to convene a common law court. Now, the common law court, which we've pointed out earlier, is the people. There are requirements for convening a common law hearing, and one of the requirements are that you have to advertise the fact that you're convening a court, which is done through the website on a public notice, and also on the premises where the hearing is to be held. So therefore, you give notice of your intention to convene a court, and then basically the public turn up. It's open to anyone to attend. They can turn up. They're then informed about the procedure, what's going to happen, and then you require court officers and jury members. Now, this is done randomly through random selection. If hypothetically you ask for jury members and you have 24 volunteers, well, the juries we only actually convene with 12. So if you have 24 people volunteering, we explain that we have too many and ask if some of them will decline from proceeding with this or volunteer. If 12 people were just to put their hands down and say, look, we won't bother, if we're left with 12, that's fine, we'll take the 12. If the 24 stayed and said, no, we all want to do it, well, then what we do is draw lots randomly to select 12 jury members. The same applies to court officers, and they're given instruction in relation to their role and what they do. When I actually presented the case, I presented it to the common law court. The common law court is the people. It's not one individual. I was there taking a case to the court. So I put the information to the people, and it was simple. In relation to Linda's situation, they had actually issued an extradition order through the fraudulent use of the name, the title that they wish to attach to her, and they've done so without full disclosure in the statutory courts, which are not even courts. So they haven't even established proper authority and jurisdiction to deal with it. It's all fraudulent. So based on the information and the documentation we'd had, I put this before a jury to explain the situation. The jury adjourned and took about an hour or so to come up with a decision, but they had decided that they would annul the decision, which I had asked for. They also decided, because of the use of the 1939 Cancer Act, they decided it was unacceptable, so they've actually cancelled that, annulled it. So that's been struck off as well. And then they actually give an order to remove Justice Supperstone from his position immediately without any financial benefits. So that was done as well. Now, in relation to that, there was a final order which stated that the assets that were taken from David and Linda should be returned within 14 days as well. So that order was given, and then based on that, was submitted it to the courts. Now, initially, because the procedure had been dealt with at an appeal court, at the High Court in London, at the Strand, they initially get the copy of the paperwork in relation to this. So what I've done is I lodged, because I have power of attorney and ownership of the legal fiction, I submitted the paperwork to the High Court explaining that I was lodging a challenge to their authority and jurisdiction. And I also informed them that the extradition order has now been annulled. Now, despite putting it in by email and then having recorded a receipt for recorded delivery the very next day, they have the paperwork, and despite numerous phone calls to them, they will not speak to me. And that went in last Thursday, so we had Thursday, Friday, and then Monday and Tuesday. They wouldn't speak to me at all. So therefore, I decided to move up, because ultimately it will go to the Supreme Court. So I contacted the Supreme Court today and said, look, they're not responding. This is a matter of urgency. They cannot ignore this. It's coming here anyway. So I'm now lodging a challenge to the Supreme Court. Now, the email went in this morning with all the documentation, the paperwork. The CPS got it, and the barrister representing the CPS all got copies. Within an hour or so of this going in, the Supreme Court came back. Was a nice gentleman who responded and said, look, we have your paperwork. Before we can proceed with your appeal, we require additional information. Do you have a copy of this paperwork and the order you refer to? Now, that is part of the trickery, because what they've actually done is they've said to me here, before we proceed with your appeal, I wasn't appealing. So I responded to them and said, look, I'm not appealing anything. This has been dealt with by a superior court, which is the common law court. The decision has already been annulled. All I'm doing is I require a hearing, because I'm lodging a challenge to the authority and the jurisdiction of the courts and the Crown, because I believe that the CPS will not be happy about this, so I want to challenge the authority and jurisdiction. So that went back an email. It was only a couple of hours later, and then we closed for business for the end of the day. So we'll see what they have to say tomorrow. But on this point, given the fact that the High Court failed to respond at all. They don't want to deal with this issue because it affects every member of public. Now, when you also think about the work that was done in relation to a cancer cure, which we can say under common law, because the 1939 Act is now
Has been annulled.
doesn't exist, and under common law, as a living man, as I'm speaking to it, it seems to be a cancer cure. So I'm going to use that terminology, which we can do. But the point is, this information should be out there to the public. And again, the fact that they're trying to close this down, not because it doesn't work, it's for business, it's for vested interests, pharmaceutical companies. They should not be allowed to do this. They should not be allowed to target innocent men and women that come up with cancer cures. And if you think about the amount of people that's affected by this, it's disgusting that the state not only allow it, but they actually assist in this process. Now, these judges and anyone involved in this process should be held accountable. They should answer to the people. The people have the authority. Why are they allowed to get away with this? And I noted your comment earlier on, which I did pick up on as well, is that they've just been given a huge pay increase, up to 25% of their salary, to keep them in a job. And yet it's confirmed here as a fact that in doing their job, they're committing fraud on a daily basis and crimes against the people. So what the people have to understand now, you're not asking anyone to change the system or to invent the wheel again. The system works, it's there, it's fine. The problems are the people that are actually managing the system or running it. They're doing it for vested interest, to protect themselves and for money. They're not interested in people. And yet, if these people are in that position and behaving like that, which is criminally, they should be removed. Now, up until now, there's been no way to hold these people accountable, but through common law courts, they can be summoned to appear in front of the people. The people have the authority, the people dictate what's acceptable and what's not. And until such time as this is obviously changed, this is going to be very difficult change in the system. But this is obviously the stage we're at. So what I'm going to do is contact the Supreme Court tomorrow, find out, see if they get back to me. We're looking for a hearing, and the hearing will be challenge the authority and jurisdiction of the court. We've also asked them to confirm that no further action will be taken just now against Linda. Now, what you've got to also point out to your listeners as well, technically, at this moment in time, Linda has recorded her birth with the common law court. She exists as a living woman. That is confirmed, and that has already been accepted in the statutory courts. With the production of a common law birth certificate, they have no authority over a living woman. The only other way that they can attack her is through the legal fiction. But unfortunately, the legal fiction is not attached to her. I own the legal fiction, it's mine. So therefore, if they're issuing a sentence or an extradition order against the fiction, it's got nothing to do with Linda. I have the fiction. And unfortunately, they can't get away with what they're doing because it's fraudulent anyway. It's criminal coercion. And not only that, it's based on the presumption that the legal fiction was involved in the production and distribution of this product. However, it's not. I own the fiction. I've never seen the product. I know nothing about it. It's as I've not been involved in it. So they can't deal with that. And again, they do not have the authority or jurisdiction to even rule in this matter because I don't consent to it. They've already accepted the fact they've no personal jurisdiction over a living man anyway. So unfortunately, it's going to be very difficult for the state to argue this. But what we need people to do just now is to show support and stand with her. Ideally, is to contact the Supreme Court.
Right, we have the contact details up on screen here, and this is the modified version of what was put up on my YouTube live stream the other day. So because obviously it's now escalated to the Supreme Court, so here's the request, and this is obviously your handiwork to support David Noakes and Linda Tyre. We are asking people to telephone or email the Supreme Court in London and to ask them when the court hearing will be held for the challenge to their authority and jurisdiction, and ask them why they are failing to respond to a lawfully issued challenge. And they should send their email to registry@supremecourt.uk. Mark the email for the attention of the registrar, and make reference to the case number, which is C0/1839/2018. And so the more people that can find the time and the inclination to send an email to the Supreme Court, it's time to let the judiciary know that they are not only under scrutiny, but increasingly more and more people are becoming aware of the fraud which they perpetrate on a daily basis throughout the entire country and even further afield. So this is a very, very interesting and pertinent challenge, and of course it's absolutely critical that David and Lynn are not extradited, and obviously this is Big Pharma using the statutory process to ensure that there is no realistic challenge to their supremacy in terms of orthodoxy of cancer cure, i.e. chemo and radiotherapy, for which they make an enormous amount of, or generate an enormous amount of revenue.
Yeah, no, it is. The more and more, I think this issue is important because it affects literally everyone in the world. It says everyone will have either a friend, a family member who's affected by cancer at one point in their life or at some stage. Now, the fact that there is a cure available and people can use is disgusting that the state are actually keeping this information away, trying to close this down, and more importantly, attacking innocent individuals that's involved with this. Now, not only that, they're doing so through fraud, which we've confirmed, and a fraudulent judicial system. And it's all done to line the pockets of big pharmaceutical companies and obviously enhance the state's position. Now, the courts there, this should be used for justice. They're not. It's time the people actually started to think about this, how it affects them. It's not a matter of simply turning around and saying, look, this doesn't affect me. You have issues just now which are pending. One is this issue in relation to cancer. You've got other issues which are also pending. You've got 5G as well, which is a major issue worldwide. It affects everyone. People need to stand together. But unfortunately, if you stand and you fight them within their system, the chances are you're not going to win. You have to establish your position as a living man, a living woman, and use the authority that you have. This is the easiest way to deal with it. Yeah,
John, absolutely, and you're on point here. You've picked up the gauntlet. You've taken the whole issue of common law to another level, and thanks to the situation that David and Lynn find themselves in, then obviously this is an opportunity to literally challenge the jurisdiction and the legality, or the lawfulness, shall I say, rather than legality, the lawfulness of the statutory courts. So now, John, where can people go to get more information on the work of the Common Law Court and any updates on what you're doing and what the Common Law Court process is doing?
Bearing in mind that what you have to remember here is it's unlike the statutory system. The common law court is not a business. It doesn't have premises. Nobody gets paid for any work. We have no funds. The common law court exists purely as a process to obtain a lawful remedy. However, the only thing that's available is a website, which is www.commonlawcourt.com. Now, when you go onto that, this has been developed. Further information has been added. We have a latest news section as well. People can go on and record their birth free of charge. It doesn't cost anything to record any information there. It's to establish your position as a living man and woman, and then the updates will be there. There's a video page and an opportunity for people to submit a 2 to 3 minute video should they wish to comment on any issues which they believe are applicable to a legal or lawful system in relation to this, the issue with cancer, or in relation to 5G or anything else, even the behaviour of the state. They can record the video, submit that. This is available for everyone to view free of charge. To see with the latest news, anything will go up. There is a forum which we've just started as well, but we've got many people using this just now. There'll be additional contacts set up on the coming week throughout the UK because of many people involved in this. And as I said earlier on, we're now up to 59 countries with people recording of us on the site. So it's there, everything's on there. There will be additional information. There's also the opportunity for people to join in and to assist in this process. But they can do that. There's also a contact on the website as well if they want information.
Excellent. John, thank you so much for driving this initiative. Thank you for your outstanding presentation at AV10. And obviously, keep me posted, and I will share, whatever I can through my morning bulletins. And I look forward to sitting in on a common law court at some future date so that I can observe the process. And certainly, anything that we can do to expose the corruption of the statutory courts and the way in which they are literally manipulating people into abject slavery, then obviously it's all got to be positive. So meanwhile, of course, the primary objective here is to prevent Lynn's extradition. And, this is a subject very, very close to many people's heart. And, if Lynn is extradited and obviously David starts the court process, or is scheduled to start the court process next February, then if he's extradited to France, then, it will be an absolute travesty. And, of course, Big Pharma will have protected its revenue. So, John, thanks so much for joining me this evening. And I'm sure it's the first, but I'm sure it won't be the last time that you appear as a guest on Humanity vs. Insanity. So, once again, thanks for everything that you're doing on this particular subject.
Yeah, well, again, thanks for having me, and also thank you to the viewers for listening in. Hopefully, should have found it informative. Okay.
And, obviously it's a tough subject. Like I've said, it's so far beyond most people's bounds of perception. It really does take a real effort to get your head around. As was obviously the case with John, and in my case, then there's nothing that helps get your head around it than it actually getting right up close and personal to each of us. And just to emphasize the website again, where you can get the information and register your birth with the Common Law Court is www.commonlawcourt.com. Right, moving on. I'm going to close out the program with a reference to another AV10 speaker, and this is David Dubin. Now, as I have stated previously, I had never come across David until he called me literally out of the blue about 6 or so weeks before AV10. And from that conversation, I knew immediately that David needed to be on platform at AV10. And the work that he's doing in raising awareness of the real climate emergency, the one that the establishment don't want anyone to know about, so they're keeping people distracted with the fake anthropogenic climate change, stroke global warming, stroke extreme weather BS. And of course, putting out that there's 12 years to actually, save the planet and save humanity from extinction. In reality, there's something occurring that is actually much closer, much more imminent, and David Dubin is on point in trying to raise awareness of this. So here's the clue. This is a quote from a Canadian news article where it says, Newfoundland and Labrador farmers lament 2018 as one of the hardest growing seasons ever. June snow, summer drought and September frosts made for challenging conditions. And here we have a picture of one of the frosts on the equinox on September 21st last year. And but apparently irrigation systems managed to save the pumpkin patch. Well, David has been continuing his analyses, And he's put out a video literally in the last couple of days or so, which is sharing the evidence that leads him to believe that corn prices will be through the roof by the end of the year because of the extreme weather, which has nothing to do with man's activities and certainly is not related to CO2. It's related to the Maunder minimum. And, those people who study astronomy know very well what's occurring. But of course, those who aren't in the loop have no clue. So what's occurring right now is the equivalent of somebody stumbling across a lost tribe that knows nothing about astronomy and convincing them that they have the power over the sun by pretending to throw a spear at the sun just as an eclipse is about to take place. Well, consider the possibility that the establishment or elements within the establishment know very well what is about to unfold, but the impact is potentially so great, they just don't want to share it, and they would rather just let the impact of the Maunder minimum hit and then worry about the consequences later. So the picture you see on screen right now is one of the screenshots from David's latest video. And this is the picture in part of the USA right now where they are way behind schedule in terms of planting. And here's the data for the current year. And what you see here is that in 2019, as at the end of May, between 31 and 35 million acres have not been planted. And this is the lowest level of planting in recorded history. And this is due to the extreme weather, which is linked directly to the solar activity, i.e. the Maunder minimum, which those who study this have known about for many years. And at AV, over the past decade, we have been trying to get people to comprehend what is unfolding here. And so right from 2008 at AV1, where we had Peter Taylor, the author of his book Chill, a former advisor to the UN, who was predicting precisely what David is now talking about as a result of the Maunder minimum over 15 years ago. Then we've had David Bellamy, Johnny Ball, Piers Corbyn, Peter Taylor a second time, and now David Dubin. And here's what happened on May the 31st when the figures about planting were produced. The futures prices jumped by more than 10%, from under 400 to 440. And in China, major problems are being experienced by Chinese farmers right across the central belt there. Now, consider the possibility that the Chinese government know very, very well what is about to unfold, which would explain why China, over the past couple of decades or so, has made a very real effort to ingratiate itself into Africa. And here's a screenshot from the Council on Foreign Relations, which says that China has become Africa's largest trade partner and has greatly expanded its economic ties to the continent. But its growing activities there have raised questions about its non-interference policy. Well, of course, that's the richest statement coming from the Council on Foreign Relations, pot, kettle and black and all that. So let's have a look at China's trade with Africa. And you can see here that literally between 1995 and 2015, China has put enormous attention onto establishing a relationship and a presence in Africa. And in 2015, China loaned some $12 billion to Africa and actually pumped in another $3 billion in terms of investments. And now China ranks as the second most significant investor in sub-Saharan Africa. And here's an interesting observation. China is somewhat or very positive influence in their country. So this was a survey, and 63% of people surveyed said China is a somewhat or very positive influence in our country. So China is seen very much as the benign partner, which of course is a very different stance than taken by the Council on Foreign Relations. But consider the possibility that China is actually looking out for its citizens and basically doing what the British did in Ireland. So during the potato famine, as is now very, very well known and very, very well documented, there was no famine in Ireland. It was simply a case of the British landowners were shipping the food produce out of Ireland to the UK mainland and further afield. And it was on the basis that the Irish couldn't afford to buy the food, so it was just being shipped out. And the staple product for the Irish diet, the potato, then there was a blight, and of course that led to mass starvation and mass emigration. But it was the British protecting what they perceived to be their citizens and their empire. Consider the possibility that China is now doing something similar and looking to establish a foothold in what will be the primary growing areas for the planet in the very, very near future. And what got David into this was his realization a few years ago that farmers in subtropical regions were starting to experience highly unusual and very pernicious frosts. And if you look at what's in the news right now, there are early frosts in the growing areas in Australia, areas that have never seen frost before. So consequently, farmers are finding it increasingly difficult to maintain their yield and are having to plant extra to account for the frost. So this is the real climate change, nothing at all to do with humanity's activities, which do pollute, and that's a whole other issue. In terms of what is affecting the climate, it is the Maunder minimum. And of course, the geoengineering agenda may actually be an attempt to prevent heat loss, when in fact what it's actually doing is it's exacerbating the problem by preventing the sun's rays reaching the ground. And this is all going to have a devastating impact on the growing capacity of the planet. So do visit David's outstanding YouTube channel, Adapt 2030, because David isn't just about flagging up the impact, the horrendous potential impact of the Maunder minimum. He's also about looking at new methods of food production. Methods of food production that can be deployed regardless of what happens externally in terms of the open weather. So take a look. I think David Dubin has a very, very important message. And as is always the case, don't take his word for it. Don't take my word for it. Do your own research. But let me tell you that what you will find if you go to his work with an open, objective mindset, then you will realize the magnitude of the deceit, the deception, the obfuscation, and the outright lies perpetrated by those who push the Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 version of man-made climate change. Now, everything being equal and schedules permitting, David, I hope, will be my next guest on the next episode of Humanity vs. Insanity. Not sure yet when that will be, but do watch the live streams and I'll keep you posted. So that's it from me tonight. My thanks again to John Smith for his outstanding work and his ability to articulate an extremely complex matter in a way that hopefully is comprehensible, at least sufficiently comprehensible to stimulate further curiosity so that people will go and do their own research. And like I said, nothing stimulates that curiosity than the issue getting up close and personal and finding the need to be creative and challenging statute law. So I'll be back hopefully tomorrow morning at 8:30, and we'll be taking a look at what has transpired in Peterborough today. Have the Brexit party done what I anticipate, and that is basically cleaned up with something in the region of about 50% of the vote? Or will the percentage of postal votes bear no relationship to previous elections, and the result bear no relationship to the exit polls? Let's see what transpires. So join me tomorrow morning at 8:30 for the live stream, and I'll see you with a future episode of Humanity vs. Insanity as and when. Thanks again. You take care now.